Hello and welcome back to the ShefF1 podcast with me, Rudy Blankbrown, and Seb Austin and Amy Hammerslag. Now, we'd like to apologise again for another sort of little hiatus that we've taken from recording podcast episodes. But in our defence, there has been very little F1 over the last few weeks. Thankfully, though, we've got a triple header coming our way, starting with this weekend's United States Grand Prix at the Circuit of the Americas. A track that usually provides some great racing, and I'm really looking forward to this weekend. We've got another sprint, and I did see a thing, we've got 3 sprint races coming up in the final 6 races of the season, and so there should be a lot of entertainment coming our way. And if you are watching this and wondering if we're going to take another break, we probably won't be doing now. We are all back at uni, which is why and how we sort of started this podcast in the first place. We've got access to all the equipment now, and we should be back for good until the end of the season. And hopefully we'll keep ourselves busy over the Christmas break as well. Anyway, enough of the yapping. Before we get into the US Grand Prix weekend, we have got some stuff on the agenda to talk about. One news article that came out last night, a big, almost breaking news story, I'd say, from F1 and the FIA, is that the fastest lap bonus point will be leaving us. It will cease to exist from the 2025 season, and that really upset me because I understand why they've done that. It's obviously to stop the Red Bull and RB teamwork that we saw in Singapore, which got Daniel Ricciardo the fastest lap, taking it off McLaren, which is obviously huge in that championship fight. But Seb, I'll start with you. What do you think of them getting rid of such a, I think, entertaining concept to add to a race weekend?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame. I would have liked them to keep it, but maybe change the way they did it. So maybe I know obviously they have it that, top 10, you have to be in the top 10. But obviously, we saw with Ricciardo, you can be outside the top 10 and still have fastest lap. It just means no one gets the point. Maybe they could do it the fastest lap of the top 10, so it's guaranteed that you can't just have a back marker just, put on softs on the last lap and have a low fuel run for fastest lap. I think that's the biggest thing against it. Other than that, if they just change it to that, I don't know why they wouldn't keep it. I mean, I know there are some occasions where a person in 7th has such a massive gap to behind them that they can go for fastest lap, but I think that's fine as well. I don't see a problem with that. So yeah, I think it's weird, but yeah, I understand the teamwork thing. But if it was to do with the Red Bull and RB thing, and they thought that was an issue, why are they allowed in the sport at all? If they think that they're teaming up to do stuff like that, they shouldn't be allowed. You can't have 4 cars on the grid. So I don't know if it is in response to that, but yeah, it's a bit weird. But yeah, what did you think of it, Amy?
I have the exact same thoughts. I get why, because the Daniel Ricciardo getting the point at the last race meant that even if Lando Norris wins every race from now and Max Verstappen finished seconds, even with the fastest lap for Lando Norris, he cannot win the championship. And it was, obviously the teamwork within the team. I don't know whether it was because of that. It was Daniel's last race and he probably wanted to have a little something, but it's just the fact that it looks a bit dodgy. It's the 2 RB teams. So if they think that, they're removing it because of that, but how are they even 4 cars for one team on the grid? That's where the corruptness comes, not the fastest point. So I don't really get it, but I'd rather just it stays, every extra point for a championship. It's getting so close now. Why not have it? It's more excitement at the end of the day for the sport. So yeah, I don't really understand it all.
To be fair, I feel as if you explain the concept of the dynamic of Red Bull and RB as on that sort of sister team basis to someone that isn't too familiar with the sport, you would sort of maybe think that, you give them benefit of the doubt and say, to be fair, there hasn't been much over the course of both teams' existence. There hasn't been much sort of inter-team play, apart from obviously sharing drivers and sharing personnel. There hasn't been a long history of tactics used, using RB as a sort of scapegoat to help Red Bull in their championship hopes and, obviously their previous identities as well. I think it's a massive shame that we are saying goodbye to the fastest lap point. I think it really has added a real element of entertainment since they sort of brought it back. I think, was it 2019 or something like that? That kind of ballpark. I honestly, top of my head, and I couldn't really tell you. But I think especially when there has been some pretty boring racing, sort of in the occasional season from when it was introduced until now, there has been always that question mark of who will go and sacrifice everything for that fastest lap, and it's been something that teams have used. Mercedes are ones that sort of love a fastest lap point, aren't they? They usually sort of send that, we'll just send George out, stick him on some softs, and he'll go get the fastest lap. I mean, obviously with Bottas as well, that was a huge thing, and I think it just created loads of drama, loads of entertainment. But if they are doing that to try and stop the teamwork between Red Bull and their sister team RB, then I suppose that does make a little bit of sense. But yeah, bit of a shame to see it go. And would you guys be in favour instead for a point for pole position? I mean, Seb, you suggested an alternative of just the fastest 10, the top 10 fastest lap and exclude everybody else, not just from the points but from consideration in the first place. But would you maybe think about a point for pole position?
Yeah, I think I've always thought that should be a thing anyway. I think that would be I think we see it in other series, other forms of motorsport. There are, some with a point for pole. So I think that would be a good thing to bring in, replace it. And it would add more to qualifying, add an extra dynamic to it. But yeah, I don't think there'd be any harm by adding that, and I don't think anyone would complain. And yeah, I think it would just add a little bit more of a oomph to the Saturday, I think. So yeah, I wouldn't mind that.
Amy, point for pole, yes or no?
No, I just feel like it'd be like obviously the top teams then only getting that point, and it'd be quite nice. It's quite nice if Daniel Ricciardo in his last race, I know he couldn't get the point, but like he can still go get fastest lap, and teams that are smaller teams, if they're finishing in the top 10, like let's say Alex Albon, and he's got a soft pair of tyres on and go get another point just by doing a fastest lap, they won't end up seeing the rewards if it's just for pole. So yeah, I just think either have the fastest lap point or just scrap it altogether.
Yeah, I mean, a point for pole is something that has been talked about for a while as maybe being something introduced to F1, and you did mention, Seb, that it is a thing in other racing series. However, more often than not, they are spec series that have that point for pole position, so all the cars are, equal in big air quotes. And obviously in F1 that is not the case. Now, if we've got a really close championship fight, like we may have with Norris and Verstappen, certainly like the one we had with Max and Lewis a few years ago, if we have a close championship fight, then yes, a point for pole position would be really, really tasty. However, we are banking on something that isn't, a guarantee every single season, a fight for the top spot. And so I think it just, to remain on the safe side and to reduce the sort of the gulf between the top teams and the bottom teams and even the midfield, to reduce that sort of gulf in quality, in points, and I think maybe best just leave out the point for pole. But fastest lap, yeah, definitely going to be a tough one to say goodbye to. But we'll move on from that now. A big talking point going into this weekend has been the sort of major revelation in the Red Bull floor. So Seb, I mean, you're one that understands like technical stuff way better than any of us. Have you read it? Have you not read it at all?
No.
Okay, moving on from that now, we have got another sort of major story that has broke over the course of the last couple of days, and that is that Red Bull are dirty cheats. Now, okay, that maybe is putting it a bit strongly, but the FIA recently have sort of had correspondence with Red Bull, and they have admitted to having a device called a bib that sort of changes the ride height of the car, which they have had in qualifying, if that makes sense. That's sort of explained pretty poorly. There is an article on the race if you want to sort of have a better look at that, because it's all really technical and none of us really understand it, but it changes the ride height of the car, and you're not supposed to do that. That is not compliant with Parc Fermé rules, and of course ride height is hugely important with this current edition of F1 cars, because of the ground effect. You want a higher car, so more air goes underneath the car into the sort of aerodynamic work on the floor, and then you want a lower car if you just want some more speed down the straights. Less downforce means more straight line speed, and so Red Bull have been sort of pretty crafty in that they've been able to hide it for so long, but not everyone has been particularly critical. Of course, McLaren, after their controversy with the rear wing, gosh, this is a difficult one to speak about, their controversy with the rear wing that they had running, they're not going to be the biggest fans of this, but Lewis Hamilton has come out and said, our sport is about innovation. Red Bull have been the leaders and they've innovated. So it's, sort of interesting high praise there, definitely shades of the, was it dual axis steering, the sort of where they pulled the steering wheel forward a few years ago and put the wheels in a straight line. I mean, let's not go into detail as to, do we think they should be able to keep the device or not, because none of us have any idea what it means. I mean, I know this is probably not the best thing to say, but we are by no means experts. We're just people with a passion for the sport. But do you reckon there could be maybe a harsher implication for Red Bull, Amy, rather than just like a slap on the wrist from the FIA and an agreement going forward? Do you reckon, basing your sort of understanding of this, should there be a more severe punishment, especially considering the backlash McLaren received for their rear wing?
Well, once a cheat, always a cheat, isn't it? I mean, it's not the first time in the sport in the last few years, so obviously that was more overspending rules. But yeah, it is bad, and I think it's especially bad because of all, the news going around about McLaren, which was actually found to be legal, and McLaren decided, you know what, to stop you all complaining, we'll take it away and we'll still beat you. And we've seen that in Singapore. So it is, very contradictory. And maybe, like I said, it's not the first time for Red Bull where there's been a bit of a scandal. So maybe it should be a harsh punishment to deter them from doing it again.
Yeah, I mean, certainly could have some implications in the title fight, Seb. Of course, Red Bull haven't been particularly quick ever since that sort of first Lando win in Miami. There has been a sort of shift in power and sort of, I suppose, expectations going into the race weekend. They're certainly not the team that they were last season, never mind at the start of this season as well. But do you think this could be a sort of, of course, something like this bib device could mean that Red Bull could be even slower now? Do you reckon that this could, really harshly sort of affect Max's chances of winning the championship at the end of the season?
I mean, it could do, but it also might have very little effect. I think that if it had been having such a huge effect that, on their performance, that I think it would have been made out to be a bigger deal and they would actually be, actually properly punished for it. I think obviously just because, I think them, trying to, get ways around, the regulations, I don't have a problem with that, honestly. I think that it's something I like, and I like when you see things, even like that McLaren rear wing, or other things in the past, that like DAS system. I think that I really like that. I thought that was a cool thing, and I think that pushing them is the right thing to do, and I think that I had no problem with it, and it's up to the FIA to determine whether it's right or wrong, and if they haven't written the rules clearly enough, that's on them. And I think that I don't have a problem with it, and I think that I don't think it's going to impact Red Bull that much. I think that if they were, as they were at the start of the season, they were by far the quickest team, and this had happened, I feel like it would be like, oh, this would be really exciting. But I still feel like there's a clear enough gap back to, say, like Aston Martin and Williams and stuff like that, that even if it does have a negative effect, I think that they're still going to be fourth quickest team or third quickest team. So I don't think that it's going to make much of an impact, really.
I mean, I like what you said there about how, if the rules aren't written clearly enough, then teams should be allowed to experiment. And I agree. I think it's some of our favourite stories as F1 fans to reminisce about. You take Brawn, what they did in 2009, for example. As long as it's within the rules and they are allowed to do it, then they should do it. It's just a shame that we don't see it often from the smaller teams. I think that would be really cool to see some real innovation lower down the grid, which, could mean that one midfield team just surges ahead of the rest out of nowhere. I mean, I'm sure, Aston Martin, they've not had a great season this season, but Adrian Newey coming in, I reckon there will be some technical sort of revelations made to hopefully bring that car back to where it is and get Fernando Alonso his third Drivers' Championship, although we can all dream. We'll go back to that title fight now. Obviously, This is quite a sort of a big story in the context of the title fight, but when Max Verstappen was asked about how he feels about these last 6 races of the season, he said in a very Dutch fashion, he's not really worried about anything. Now, George Russell has named Lando Norris as his favourite to win. Do you guys agree with what Russell's saying, or do you think Max will hold on for these last 6 races, or will someone else come in? I mean, stranger things have happened. No, they haven't really. I mean, but
Charles Leclerc, outside chance.
Do you reckon?
Very slim. No, I don't reckon at all.
Seb, what about you?
I find it really tough to say, because I do think Norris is in with a really, really good shout. It's, and I think that the question marks beforehand were, thinking, will he be able to, keep his head, and is he actually able to have performances like Verstappen did, where he just dominates an entire weekend? And we've seen that he can do that now, and he's got over that sort of mental barrier, it feels like. And if he has the quickest car, I feel like he is just going to win like every race, and because I think it is more so on Red Bull to be, try and consistently be that second quickest team, because obviously if they can, then I think Verstappen's got enough in him to, just about get over the line. But I think it's just completely up in there. Any sort of DNF, I think that blows it completely wide open. If Verstappen has a DNF, Norris wins.
Crazy.
Norris is then the clear favourite.
It swings
and
it,
it's the other way around,
open,
though.
Yeah.
Then Verstappen is, he's got quite a lot of breathing room. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really, really exciting end to the season, and I cannot wait for Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
I feel like we're going to be in. I reckon it's.
Line?
I think it would definitely go to the last race of the season. I reckon it could be, somewhere, in about 10 points. I reckon in between the two. And I reckon that is going to be so exciting.
The team orders are going to be absolutely mental at Abu Dhabi. I mean, who's to say that Oscar Piastri doesn't do a little mad run in the next... Well, I mean, in the next 5 races, if Piastri goes on a bit of a mad one now. Because, you said that Norris has got over that mental barrier and can dominate a weekend like Verstappen can do just sort of pretty casually when he's got the right car underneath his feet. But... there's no doubt that Piastri can sort of do the same, really. I mean, we have seen some excellent drives from him now, and he's only going to get better. And there are some sprint races for him to conquer as well. A format that he has, excelled in the past. His first F1 race was, of course, at Qatar in a sprint race last year. But yeah, I mean, Piastri will be a really interesting sort of either device or hindrance to Lando Norris here. There have been, of course, talks of team orders at McLaren, and Jenson Button is someone that says, McLaren should bring them team orders in, and they really, need to use Piastri as a sort of stepping stone for Norris to go and get that first Drivers' Championship. I mean, of course, they're ahead in the Constructors now as well, and I doubt they're too worried about losing that and letting that slip. But then, of course, Verstappen's come out and said Piastri's too good to be a number 2 driver. So the mind games have already begun, and there are still 6 races to go, including, not including 3 sprint races sort of sprinkled in there, including this weekend at Austin. But we'll sort of talk more about upgrades now as well. Because both teams are bringing upgrades into Austin this weekend. By both teams, I mean McLaren and Red Bull. Not sure if they're going to be of any sort of real significance. I reckon it will be a sort of similar head-to-head kind of battle. But another team bringing a huge upgrade this weekend is Mercedes. However, we've spoke about it a lot already, the sprint race format. This has actually hindered them for once. Hamilton has said that they are bringing a sort of massive Ferrari Monza-esque upgrade into COTA, but because of their lack of practice time, it means that they won't be able to really truly see how fast that car can go. I mean, Amy, are you a fan of the sprint format? Because we've got a lot coming up, and of course this weekend as well. Do you think Hamilton has a point here, and that they have no time to test out such a huge upgrade? I mean, could you say that's down to the team, because Hamilton has said they are out of sync with everyone else's upgrades? But what is your thought on that? Where do you lie on that?
I do like the sprints. I feel like at times we do talk badly about them, but it is entertaining. I mean, tonight we've got one practice and then we get a sprint qualifying, so on a Friday, and I do think it brings that sense of entertainment. And as long as 6 race weekends, that's only 6 race weekends. But like you said, I was thinking, it is a bit rubbish on the team, but why would they bring it this weekend then? Why, there's been so many races over the European leg where there's been no sprints, and they could have brought it then, and instead they bring it where there's only one practice session. It does really make sense to me. So, I think Hamilton's right in what he's saying there, and I think it's not sprint races should stay.
Yeah, Seb, let's talk about Mercedes as a whole, as a team, throughout this season. Has it been a step up from what was a year to, I'd say, forget about last year? Do you reckon, maybe this year, with sort of mistakes like this, not keeping on top of their upgrade pattern, letting other teams get way ahead of them, I mean, we'll do this at the end of the season, sure, but if you had to quickly sort of grade Mercedes' season so far and maybe sort of anticipate how well their race weekend will go, has it been good? Has it been bad? Will it be good and will it be bad this weekend?
Yeah, it's been such a weird year for Mercedes. Like they've had really good highs. Obviously, had that little spell in the European part of the season where they obviously got 3 race wins and they were looking really competitive. But then in recent races, they've really gone off the boil. And at the start of the season, they were nowhere to be seen. Whereas I feel like last year they were a little bit more consistent, but they never really looked like they had the pace to properly challenge at the front. But obviously, Hamilton came 3rd. I think they came 2nd in the Constructors. So it is sort of a bit of a downgrade from last year, but I feel like they're showing a little bit more potential that potentially next year they could actually fight properly at the front, whereas I feel like the year before they were a little bit, all over the place. So, but I think this weekend, once again, they're so unpredictable, and I think it's so weird seeing this team going from all conquering and so consistent to the least consistent out of the top four, arguably. I think them and Ferrari, their pace at times is all over the place.
Yeah.
I have no idea whether they're going to bring this upgrade and look good or look bad. We've seen it with Hamilton as well this season, where actually the less time he has to mess around with the car, the better he is. So that could actually come into it might actually help him this weekend. So I have no idea. I reckon they'll have an all right weekend, but nothing special. I think that the teams around them, I think Ferrari and I think McLaren, are going to have good weekends. So, yeah, I think it's just this upgrade is going to hopefully help them for the remaining 5 races. But, yeah, we'll see what happens.
I think it's probably best that they don't have practice sessions this weekend, because it seemed like they dominate on a weekend, all the practice sessions, and you're going into quali thinking, ooh, they could do something here. And they never do. And they never do over a race either. So maybe less time, the better, so they don't have, as much time to mess with the car and, maybe just see what the upgrades are like in full force when we go into, qualifying session.
Okay, so in typical ShefF1 fashion, there have been some technical difficulties, but we should be all right now to make some predictions for this weekend's US Grand Prix at the Circuit of the Americas. Now, if you're new around here, we have been doing predictions for almost every single race weekend of this season, give or take a couple, but we are back and we have set categories earning points for each correct answer. Okay, so we'll start off with pole position like we normally do. Now, Amy and I have made the same prediction here. Amy, do you want to reveal who we have both opted for as our pole man?
Yeah, I went for Lando Norris. I mean, it's a bit of a tricky one. Obviously, it's getting a bit shaky towards the end of the season. But I think he'll do it. I think people say, he's got this pressure on him. He's the one who's got to catch up to Verstappen. But he's the one catching. He's got nothing to lose at the end of the day. So I think he'll use that to his strength. And, as I said, nothing to lose, and he'll go for it and hopefully go get that pole position.
Yeah, definitely the favourites going into this weekend, I'd say McLaren. While Red Bull are also bringing upgrades, I think it's safe to say that their momentum at the moment is going to be quite hard to sort of topple, particularly Lando Norris as well. But Seb, you've said someone else. Who have you got to be on pole position on Saturday?
I've gone just for something a bit, random. I've gone for Charles Leclerc. I think it's just one of those weekends I could just see where Ferrari randomly have, decent pace on the Saturday. And yeah, I just think, would I, if I had to bet my, my life on it, I'd probably go for Norris. But I'm the one catching up. I'm the one chasing, just like Lando Norris. Yeah. So I'm going to take a bit of a gamble and go for Charles Leclerc. And yeah, I think he could, I might probably will lose points on this prediction, but still.
Love the honesty. I love that a lot. I mean, all risk, maybe all reward for you, Seb. We could even, give you a bonus point for that, maybe. Bend the rules a little bit, call it Red Bull style. But we'll move on to the start of qualifying. Just because with the previous drivers finished on pole position doesn't mean they're our start of qualifying. I'm kind of getting sick of saying that now, but it does kind of, make total sense. But yeah, start of qualifying. Amy, we'll start with you. Who have you said to be your start of qualifying?
I've gone for the brand new driver on the grid. I've gone with Liam Lawson. Well, he's not brand new, it's not his first race, but he's obviously been replaced by Daniel Ricciardo. And there is that chance where I think he could be in Perez's seat for 2025, and therefore he really has to start by, having a good start, and by doing that it's in the first qualifying session, and yeah, I just can see him potentially getting into Q3, and I think that'll be really successful, especially in the RB. So yeah, and especially in comparison to what Daniel Ricciardo's done this season, if he can get in that car straight away and do something that he really couldn't most of the time, then it just shows that it was the best decision made.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously is another huge talking point going into this weekend. Not just Liam Lawson, but the situation with Red Bull's second driver spot for 2025. A lot of different people saying a lot of different things. Lawson wants to prove himself in these last 6 races, hoping to score as many points as possible. Yuki Tsunoda has come out and said that he thinks he is viable. He thinks he is worthy of that Red Bull seat to go alongside Max Verstappen in 2025. And then as well, Sergio Perez has said, using that Wolf of Wall Street clip on Twitter, that he is going nowhere. So yeah, it's all to play for at Red Bull, so it seems. And let's hope for Lawson's sake that Amy's prediction is correct. Now, Seb, no surprises here as to who you've gone for start of quali, because you sort of back with a bang and mentioning your favourite driver here. Who have you said to be star of quali?
Yeah, I've gone for Pierre Gasly, but I have got some logic. Alpine are bringing an upgrade this weekend. But it's only going to be on Pierre's car, so I'm thinking that maybe they
Tech McLaren orange car.
Oh yeah, I actually quite like it. I think it's quite good.
No.
A little bit of Indiana Jones. I'm here for that. And yeah, I think he's going to deliver. I would think of an Indiana Jones pun, but haven't actually even watched the movie. So
No, neither.
yeah, there you go. I think Pierre Gasly is going to be the star of qualifying. Once again, would I actually bet my life on it? No. But actually, it probably would be Charles Leclerc if he gets pole. But still, I think Pierre maybe could sneak in, the higher end of Q2. And I think that with the team fully favouring him, it will look like a good result because Ocon will be down there struggling to get out of Q1 with an old car. So yeah, I've gone for Pierre.
Did he make it into Q3 last year? I'm pretty sure he's not got a terrible track record around this circuit, although you're going to have to test me on that or sort of...
No idea. I can't remember Austin last year at all, to be honest.
It was the race where Hamilton just went on a mad one, but I think... I mean, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, although I'm pretty sure it was a fairly successful qualifying session for Gasly. But yeah, interesting that they have already sort of just like shunned Ocon, pushed into one side. He's on his way out the team at the end of the year going to Haas, and so, why not build the team around Gasly? I'm sure that's something that they'll intend on doing for the next few years now. I can imagine with the arrival of Jack Doohan coming in, you're going to want Gasly to sort of be the spearhead of that team. But yeah, you know what? Why not? I mean, it's been a year definitely to forget for Alpine with fluctuating results, most of them bad, or so maybe not fluctuating, but anyway, yeah, it's definitely been a tough year for the team from Enstone. But yeah, Gasly, why not? Why not? It could be anyone, to be fair. Okota is often quite unpredictable. I've said another one of the newer drivers on the grid. I've said Franco Colapinto. He is someone that has been hugely impressive at the moment. He's sort of been the new driver for F1 fans to fall in love with. Some great performances for Williams after an announcement for him to join the team that wasn't taken particularly well by the wider F1 fan base, but he's done an exceptional job. And Williams tend to have great pace around Kota as well. They had great pace in Baku, and I reckon it's just between him or Albon really who will come out on top for Williams. They'll be my star of quali, but I think a Q3 is on the cards for Colapinto here, most definitely. They've got the team has a great track record. He's in fine form at the moment, absolutely nothing to lose. So yeah, I've said Colapinto. But now from our heroes to our zeros, it is time for the flop of qualifying. Amy, we'll start with you once again for the sake of continuity.
Yeah, I feel like we've all gone for the second drivers of the top teams here. I mean, Carlos Sainz, I just had to check then. I knew he's been on pole before in Austin in 2022. I feel like Ferrari could have a chance this weekend. It's totally off vibes, this one. There's no particular reason. I think they could be good enough, and I think Carlos Sainz recently has been messing up a little bit when it's come to the crash in Azerbaijan, and just not being anywhere near Charles Leclerc, which is a shame because obviously it's getting towards his last few races with Ferrari and probably does want to be up on that podium once again, one more time in the red suit. So yeah, I don't know, I just feel like he'll mess up and he won't be anywhere near his teammate potentially, and that's my reason for it.
Yeah, I've got Carlos Sainz coming a little later in my predictions, but the reasoning is pretty similar to yours. It has sort of been Charles' time over at Ferrari at the moment. Definitely second fiddle has Carlos Sainz been in sort of recent races, and I doubt he's really that bothered. He's on his way out, and I suppose he doesn't really owe them anything. But Seb, we'll move on to you. Amy sort of hinted at we've all gone with the second drivers of each team. You have made no exception to that statement. Who do you want to say to be your flop of qualifying?
Yeah, I've gone for probably the most obvious one. I've gone for Checo. I've gone for Sergio Perez. I think that he's going to be the flop of qualifying this weekend. I think, obviously we spoke a little bit about Red Bull having that, having to change their car a little bit. Maybe that will come into it. But I also think Checo's been not that bad in the last few races. So I feel like he's due a bad race just because that's how he is. So, I think he's going to have a bit of a stink. And I think with everything heating up at the top, I think there's even more pressure on him to perform and help Max out and help them out in the constructors. And I think that, he's just going to have a bit of a stinker. And I think not being able to get that rhythm, having obviously such a long time off since the last race, I think that will also play into it. And I just think he's going to have a bit of a tough time out there.
Brutal, absolutely brutal. Sorry, Checo, but I almost completely agree, except I've said George Russell. But again, pretty not similar reasoning, but I agree with everything you just said about Perez. There is of high likelihood that he'll be the flop of qualifying. He has been the flop of qualifying for most sessions throughout the duration of this season. And you know what? I think it will be a bit of a miracle if he holds on to that seat for next year, but maybe just sort of as a filler before the new regulations come into place in 2026. But I've said George Russell to be my flop of qualifying. I don't think he's had a particularly terrible season. In fact, I'd go as far to say it's been a pretty good one. But there is something about the Circuit of the Americas with Mercedes series where no matter what form either driver is in, Hamilton just comes out on top every single time. And I just think, of course, with what Hamilton said about the upgrade and how they're not going to have enough time to, truly get to grips with this new car, I just feel as though he'll perform better out of the two of them, and Russell will just... Again, not necessarily a terrible performance. He'll just, he'll be a bit far behind Hamilton, maybe miss out on Q3, especially considering how competitive the midfield will be this weekend. You've got Williams who like this track a lot. You've got Haas that have been taking some steps in the right direction, particularly around the higher speed circuits. And I just think it will be a rather, falling into obscurity kind of weekend for George Russell. Maybe repairs it a bit in the race once he's gotten to grips with the car. And of course, the sprint race changes everything as well. But I think George Russell to be my flop of qualifying. We've got no sprint predictions for this weekend, but I think we will introduce them for the remaining 2 sprint races of this season. But let's move on to our podium, our top 3 to finish the race. Seb, we'll start with you this time.
I've gone for, in P3, Max Verstappen. I think that he's going to have a solid weekend. I think, obviously the pressure's on him, and I think that Red Bull give him just about enough performance to be able to scrape in that top 3. And then P2, I've gone for Charles Leclerc, my pole sitter. I don't think he's going to hang on to it, but I think he's going to have a really, really solid weekend. And P1, I've gone for the obvious. I've gone for Lando Norris. I think that, his race pace in recent weeks has just been too strong, and I think that he's going to come through. And I think, actually, with my predictions, him not being on pole, I think that'll actually, help him a little bit as well. I know he's got over that, not leading from pole thing. But I think that, if he's starting P2, P3, and he'll be able to come through and, hopefully McLaren get their strategy right. And I think Lando Norris P1. So I think that I'm fairly confident with that prediction of the podium. Maybe Piastri's someone I'm overlooking, but he does come into my predictions later on. So I'll save that.
Yeah, I like that a lot, to be fair. 3 different teams on the podium, something we always love to see. Now, Amy, you and I have gone for the same drivers, just a different order. So, who is your top 3 prediction?
I've gone for Oscar Piastri in 3rd, Max Verstappen in 2nd, and hesitantly Lando Norris in 1st. I'm just a bit, as a Lando fan, I'm getting a bit hesitant. It's getting a bit shaky, do you know what I mean? As we get to the end of the season. And this may seem really silly, but obviously they've got the chrome on the car this week, and I feel like maybe they could be getting a little ahead of themselves adding it. Would that make the car heavier? So much so where Red Bull are able to keep up with them? I don't know, but I can see Max being with Lando. I don't see Lando dominating by 20 seconds this race, and that could be a factor, another Austria moment potentially, but it'll be between Lando and Max for me. I hope Piastri is able to pip Max and hopefully bring the championship a little bit closer.
I like that observation a lot about the chrome. I think that's a really interesting point to make. Now, like I said before, I've gone with the same drivers as you, but I've opted for a McLaren 1-2, spearheaded by Lando Norris. I've gone for Norris, Piastri, and then Verstappen to round out that podium. I feel as though there has been a lot of talk about it, and I feel as though this weekend could be the start of team orders over at McLaren, as much as I don't really want it to be. But I feel as though, not necessarily that Piastri will have amazing pace in comparison to Norris, but, of course they've got the same car, so they're going to be running a pretty similar sort of race. There's loads of opportunities to overtake around Kota as well, loads of heavy braking zones, loads of sort of opportunities to gain a slipstream, and I feel as though instead of sort of hanging onto the back of Norris, Piastri will be used to sort of defend Verstappen from Lando's raced win. I feel as though it'll be pretty tight at the top, but I think it will be a largely pretty comfortable affair for McLaren, although that sort of Piastri, Verstappen, P2, P3 could be swapped rather easily for me, but I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to go with the McLaren 1-2, Norris, Piastri, and then Max Verstappen. Now, I've gone for a really boring driver of the day prediction next, so I'm just going to get it out of the way. I've said Lando Norris, and if he wins the race, he just is Mr. Driver of the Day. I mean, he wins the fan vote every single time. All he's got to do is just breathe in the right way, and fans are all over it. He's my driver of the day prediction, just because I think that's what the vote will end up being if he does end up winning the race. But Amy, who have you said to be your driver of the day?
I've gone for Franco Colapinto. I think, like you said before, he's just a driver that everyone started to fall in love with. He's just really charismatic. He's great in the car, and then obviously there's potential that he might be in the Sauber, for next year. So that'll be really exciting for him, and also, this circuit's very similar to Baku. he got, a finished above his teammate there, and with Alex Albon. So I could just see him potentially having a good race. I feel like Williams could have a good weekend, and I love him, so I want him to do well.
Yeah, change of tune from when we first spoke about Colapinto a couple of months ago.
Do not watch any of those videos.
Yeah.
I made the right move of sort of staying very much on the fence about Colapinto in case he flopped or if he did as well as he is doing now. But there is a whole other conversation to be had about that second Sauber seat, and you know what? I think there could be a video coming your way of our thoughts on who will be partnering. Well, it's not even a partnership. They haven't decided either seat, have they?
Hulkenberg's in there.
Hulkenberg, obviously. I was thinking Guan Yu Zhou for a second. Yeah, Hulkenberg, and then who will be his teammate? We'll have to wait and see, but we might try and do a video on that in the near future because there is a lot to talk about there. Now, Seb, you have said someone different to myself and Amy. Who have you gone for to be your driver of the day?
To be honest, I just sort of plucked someone out of thin air, and I picked Alex Albon. But actually thinking about it, do you know what? I like that prediction. With the Colapinto reasoning, I think, actually, Williams, they were really strong in Baku, and I think that they'll have the opportunity to do that this weekend as well. And I think that Albon, I think he needs to, step it up a little bit, with the pressure of Colapinto coming in, and, maybe people are starting to question, maybe he isn't that good. Maybe he's only beaten teammates that aren't very good with the, Latifi and Sargent. And, I think he'll step it up this weekend. I think he'll want to prove people, look, I am the main man around here, and stamp his authority on that team. And I think he's going to have a really, really strong weekend. And I think that in the race, I think he'll, once again, that experience will show over Colapinto, and I think he's going to have a good weekend, and he's going to be my driver of the day.
Yeah, I like that prediction a lot. I mean, I like any Williams-based prediction a lot, to be fair. It's because it's usually just the most entertaining one, I think. Any track with massive straights, it's sort of a pretty easy answer to say either Williams as a team or one of the drivers, depending on the prediction. I think that it definitely needs to prove himself a little bit, Alex Albon. Colapinto's come into that team and impressed massively, even outperforming him, which we just thought was impossible. But no, he's certainly gone and done that. But now, from driver of the day, let's go on to our flops of the day. Is it flop of the day or flop of the race weekend? I can never remember.
We never know. I don't think we've
Flop
ever
of the
decided
race.
that. But yeah.
Flop of the race?
Yeah.
Is that what you've decided?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, we'll go for the flop of the race then. So, from hero to zero once again. Amy, we'll start with you as you're so adamant it's flop of the race. Who are you saying to not have a pretty fun Sunday?
I'm a bit confused. I don't remember writing this because of it. I've gone with Charles Leclerc, and this is very similar to my Sainz reasoning when I'm thinking about it now. Is I genuinely don't think Ferrari are going to have a good race, and I know you do, but normally I'm right with these.
Yeah, that's
true. I have no gut feeling about Ferrari this weekend, and not that Charles Leclerc is really being considered at all in this title fight, but he is still up there, and he's still, who knows what could happen if them two take each other out and Charles goes and wins the race.
Could you
knows?
imagine?
But I feel like, maybe, what Ferrari can get under pressure sometimes. And I just feel like it won't be his weekend. I don't believe in a DNF, but I just don't believe potentially even being up there for a podium, which should be Ferrari's priority at the minute is just getting as many points, potentially going for the constructors, because they could definitely have that over McLaren if they did things right. But we'll see. We'll see. I don't really know why I went for Charles, but that's my reasoning.
Nah, it makes a bit of sense. I mean, Ferrari definitely have gone under the radar this weekend. I mean, there obviously have been huge stories coming out of McLaren and Red Bull and sort of up and down the grid, really. And Ferrari have sort of gone under the radar a bit, which makes me think it could be a really surprisingly strong race weekend for them, or perhaps just one that will be, a very sort of mishmash, nothing too special, nothing to remember. But Seb, who have you gone for? Have you sort of have you kept with this sort of anti-Ferrari agenda, or have you said someone else?
No, I've gone for Liam Lawson. I think that VCARB's newest driver,
Okay.
I think he's going to struggle. I don't think it's going to be an absolutely horrific weekend where, he just gets in the car and he just crashes left, right and centre. I think he's too good of a driver to do that. I just think that there's a lot of expectations that he'll come in and he's going to do really well once again, just like he did last year. But I still... I think he did well last year, but I wasn't convinced that he was automatically now good enough to have that Red Bull seat or anything like that from his performances last year. Tsunoda did outperform him last year, and there were just a couple of things that happened that made it look like Lawson was maybe better than Tsunoda, some people even said. So I think that Tsunoda is going to, he's obviously had loads more experience in the car this year and things like that, and I just think that Tsunoda is a better driver, and I think he's going to prove that this weekend, especially with Lawson not having as much experience. Hasn't really driven at all this year. He hasn't been in any other series or anything like that. So, Yeah, I think that he's going to just maybe be okay on the Saturday, but when it comes to the race, I think that, over the long distance, I think he just will wear off in the end. I think that, although saying that, I did say exactly the same about Colapinto. He proved me wrong. So maybe he'll come in and be amazing, but if I had to predict, I would say that I think he's going to struggle slightly this weekend. So yeah, I've gone for Liam Lawson.
He's done it again, that Seb Alston. He's done it. He's put down a really rogue prediction and then managed to almost convince me to maybe even agree. I mean, I don't think it will be a calamity of a weekend for Liam Lawson, but you make a really good point in that this year he hasn't kept himself particularly busy. Now, last year when AlphaTauri drafted him in, it was still AlphaTauri back then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, my brain is still completely confused by the whole name agenda, whatever. But yeah, when Lawson came in, of course, he was competing in Super Formula in his spare time. I say spare time. He was a Super Formula driver before he got the call up to go and race for AlphaTauri for a little bit. And then this year he hasn't been anywhere near as busy. He hasn't been sort of behind any wheel as much, if that makes sense. And so yeah, definitely not going to be as easy an integration as it was last year. I feel as though that Kota hasn't been a great track for VCarb, RB, AlphaTauri, whatever you want to call them, in recent years. It hasn't been anything to write home about. And so, yeah, maybe it could just be one of them weekends where you forget Liam Lawson's on the grid completely, although all eyes will be on him, as they were sort of when he first sort of made his first impression about a year ago from now. But I have sort of gone down a similar route to Amy. I've said Carlos Sainz. Again, just sort of, making that easy prediction, second driver in a team that isn't performing too well at the moment. I don't think he'll crash out. I don't think he'll even miss out on the top 10. I just think that Charles could be in a fight for that podium spot and Sainz will just be sort of comfortably in the points, which isn't necessarily a terrible weekend, especially considering that McLaren and Red Bull should be quite quick arriving at Austin. But yeah, I think it'll just be a weekend that Carlos Sainz won't remember in about 3 weeks' time, once this triple header's over and done with. And yeah, I think flop might be a bit of an exaggeration, but that's just the word we're using for this prediction. So yeah, Carlos Sainz for me. Now, away from the drivers and on to the teams. Who, Amy, is your best team for this weekend?
I just feel like it's got to come at some point, and Red Bull need to have a good weekend. And like I said, with the McLaren thing, I know it's minor, but I just feel like they've been very vocal in the media this week for Verstappen and Helmut Marko and Red Bull personnel.
Yeah,
very confident. And I'm just a little bit worried as I'm sat here in my orange McLaren top, that it will finally be their weekend again, and potentially could see Max win it. And also Perez, he seems confident with that tweet. He's not leaving. And, yeah, as we said, he's got a lot to prove towards the end of the season. So, normally that doesn't mean anything. But, yeah, I could see him trying to prove a point this weekend. And then potentially Max could win it to secure a few more points in the championship title. So, yeah, Red Bull. That's why I've gone for them. Okay.
And Seb, who have you said?
Well, I've gone against everyone with their predictions here. I've gone for Ferrari, obviously in line with my Leclerc podium and Leclerc pole, and I think that Sainz will be able to stay in contention as well for maybe that 4th or 5th place. This is a guess, like a big guess, because I don't know what their performance is going to be like at all.
Yeah,
but yeah, as I said when I predicted Leclerc on pole, it's one of those weekends where I could just randomly see Ferrari turn up and like, oh wow, they're in contention. And I think that if they are in contention, I think that they'll be able to deliver a solid haul of points. And maybe with Red Bull and McLaren fighting so much, there could be opportunities there as well to maybe Sainz pick up P4 or maybe even a podium as well. So I think that I'm going to go for Ferrari.
Yeah, they've done that before, haven't they? Ferrari just randomly spawn in a near perfect race weekend, but why can't they do that again? Why not? I like this sort of all risk, all reward strategy you're going for here, because if it pays off, you're going to look like an absolute genius. But I've just not seen enough on Ferrari to really have me convinced that they'll do anything this weekend. But I could be completely wrong. Maybe they'll just go under the radar and take everyone by surprise. I've said Williams because it is a circuit that they tend to do really well around. It's usually sort of guaranteed double points, maybe even double Q3. And look, it's a track that suits the car strengths down to a T. Both drivers are in pretty okay form. I think it's safe to say Colapinto in really good form and Albon with a point to prove. But he's not there have been worse drivers on the grid so far this season, I think it's safe to say. But yeah, Williams, maybe an easy one because, a track with straight lines. Obviously, Williams are going to do well around there. But yeah, great track record around there, quite literally. And two great drivers in great form. So yeah, why not go for Williams in that regard? Now it's time for the most controversial predictions of the lot, I would say. The ones that, again, following Seb's strategy of all risk, all reward, this can be where a prediction weekend can be made or broken. It is our shock predictions now, and so this is the one that's a little bit more flexible than the rest of them. So you get 1 point for every correct answer for our predictions. However, depending on how shocking our predictions are, we can award more points out accordingly. Now, Amy, what have you said to be your shock prediction to be?
So there's not been a safety car since the Spanish Grand Prix, which was,
ages ago.
8 Grand Prix ago.
I don't even remember it, yeah.
Ago. It's been such a streak of no safety car, and even, with the Azerbaijan, obviously it was towards the end, and it ended under virtual safety car, but no physical safety car, even when there's been crashes. So, yeah, I don't think Austin's particularly a track that gets a lot of, incidents. However, I always think of 2022, and that's where I was like Carlos Sainz prediction on pole before, is like I remember he got pole and George Russell like dive bombed. It's such a wide corner going up that hill.
Yeah.
And yeah, if anything's going to happen, I could see potentially it happening there, especially if Lando's first and Max second, you could see something happening, turn one incident. And yeah, so therefore safety car, I think it's going to come out. Whether it's for a DNF or a crash, I don't know what it'll be. But yeah, safety car will be out, which is a shock, actually.
Yeah, no, I like that prediction a lot, to be fair. I mean, there have been stats left, right and centre. Max Verstappen has only won one race since the last safety car, and that sort of goes to show how long it's been since Max has had some good form come his way and how long there has been a safety car for. But yeah, look, that turn one is a sort of recipe for madness. And then not only is it, a crazy overtaking opportunity, it's then followed by like a really fast and windy part of the track, which especially on lap one could mean that there are some pretty hefty incidents, especially considering some drivers on the grid are lacking a little bit of experience. But I don't want to sort of pin down any kind of responsibility on them to create some serious incidents. Seb, I'm just looking at the spreadsheet here, and your shock prediction really would take a few people by surprise. Do you want to reveal what it is?
It's very specific. It's Piastri to DNF. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure why this would happen, but I'm going to say it's going to happen. Maybe a mechanical. I can't think that would happen. I can't.
He's the only driver, isn't he, that's consistently finished a race so far.
So,
every race.
It's got to end at some point.
Yeah.
And also, maybe he's thinking, I don't want to be number 2. I've got to prove a point. Maybe, makes a little dive bomb on Norris into turn 1, brings out the safety car. Amy gets points. I get points. Yeah. Happy days.
I mean, that would be surreal, wouldn't it? A little dive bomb on his own team. That would be so fun. But, I mean, I've gone for something a little bit different, perhaps quite specific as well. And I've set a point for Sauber, the only team on the grid this year to not score a single point. Kick, Sauber, Stake, whatever you want to call them. They've got more names than points this season, which goes to show how terrible it's been for them. Although Kota has been a track where they have been pretty close to scoring some points over the last couple of years. I mean, last year, Valtteri Bottas was one of only 2 drivers not to be lapped that finished outside of the points, and the first driver behind him was Guan Yu Zhou, and they finished 12th and 13th respectively in what was a sort of pretty, I think, calm race from memory. So, yeah, on pace, they can be sniffing around in the points, and with so much to fight for a lot of drivers this weekend, it could mean that Sauber just slip into the top 10 purely by chance. And I think it's time for them to score some points, because while it has been a pretty terrible year for them, they are making improvements. Their pit stops aren't taking an absolute age now, and the drivers just, I mean, they are a bit fed up, but they aren't making, horrendous mistakes. They are sort of in battles still. This car hasn't been like, the Haas from a few years ago, the Williams for a few years, where it's just on its own with no one to fight. They have been in some battles. However, they've not done what Alpine have done and managed to excel around certain circuits. And I feel as though that COTA could be where they do just that, or at least I'm hoping so, because they do deserve something to take away from this season. Both Guan Yu Zhou and Valtteri Bottas have driven absolutely fine, and yet that car and that team as a whole have been pretty lackluster. So yeah, a point for Sauber at COTA. Let's cross some fingers and some toes that
They've
happens
got an
for
upgrade
me.
as well, haven't they? So,
I believe so.
Yeah.
So it seems to be all to play for Sauber, I think, and they definitely need to get some points by the end of the season. Otherwise, Mattia Binotto has an even bigger job on his hands, as do the rest of that team for once they become Audi in just a couple of years' time. But that's it for predictions. That's it for US Grand Prix preview. Make sure to stick around after the weekend has concluded for our reaction to the race and our predictions. Thank you all very much for tuning in. And if you like what you're seeing, you're new around here, make sure to click subscribe, like the video if you fancy, and check us out on other platforms. We've got a TikTok, Spotify, Instagram, all linked down in our description below. But yeah, thank you to Seb and Amy for joining me once again, and thank you to you for tuning in. We'll see you later. Goodbye.
Bye.